Hi, I'm Edwin Rutch, and this is Dialogues on How to Build a Culture of Empathy, and this is actually the Benefits of Empathy section here. And I'm today here with Karla McLaren. Thanks, Karla, for joining me for this discussion.
I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
And well, I want to first start off by introducing you. You're an educator, a social science researcher, and cappella arranger. You're an empath. You're doing workshops, and you're also the author of several books, one of them being The Language of Emotions, and the one we wanted to talk about, The Art of Empathy. And I also have that here I can show on the screen, The Art of Empathy. Yeah, and there's an audio version as well that you have, and so is there more you'd like to say just by way of introducing yourself, Karla?
Sure. You talked about being an empath, and a lot of people get confused by that, which is normal. But basically, I chose that title because it was how I used to think of myself when I was in more of a metaphysical kind of New Age career. And I actually thought of empathy to the extent that I had it as a psychic skill. So for a number of years, I went down that pathway and then finally started asking some questions. So what I've done is kind of reframed empathy for myself and reframed what an empath is, and I can read from the book.
Okay, great.
So an empath is someone who's aware that he or she reads emotions, nuances, subtexts, undercurrents, intentions, thoughts, social space, interactions, relational behaviors, body language, and gestural language to a greater degree than is deemed normal. But everybody has to read all of these things in order to basically understand language. We think of language as a bunch of words on a page, or words that you and I are saying to each other. But there's also a tremendous amount underneath language that we have to understand. So that for me is what the definition of an empath is now.
Oh, okay, great. So I'm hearing that your understanding and definitions have kind of evolved over time, and this is kind of your latest definition. Great. So the other thing I did want to mention too is your website. Before we start, let me just show it. If you want to just mention the URL, this is a website.
It's karlamclaren.com.
Okay, and that's just a little screenshot here of your website, and all the information about you and the book and so forth is available at that site. So what we want to do in this, we've done a previous interview, or actually interviews and panels, and it's one of the most. The interview with you has been one of the most popular interviews that I've done around empathy. So what we wanted to talk about actually were the benefits of empathy in this discussion. And those videos are also available. It will be down on a link below the video here. There's going to be a link to a page I have on you and all the interviews that we've done before, so I'll just mention that too. But what we wanted to talk about in this discussion are the benefits of empathy. So you've done this whole book on looking at empathy, and so you've sent me a couple bullet points about what you see as benefits of empathy, and we kind of wanted to explore those. And the first one we have here, I'm going to bring that up on the screen, is the benefit of empathy. Empathy can help uncover the vital information inside every emotion.
I think most people think of empathy as something that happens between people. But for me, empathy is a skill that can be used anywhere, on anything, for any purpose. So I can empathize with the plumbing in my house and figure out how it's supposed to work and what has gone wrong and what it needs. You might also call that investigating it. But for me, it's I try to get into a feeling sense of what needs to happen. When I was little, my empathy was extreme and excessive. You would call me a hyper empath. And it was very uncomfortable. I would go into a room and people would be having whatever emotions or situations or fights that they were having. And I would somehow pick up all of it in my body and feel each of these emotions, or all of them, right? And be overwhelmed. So I turned away from people because they were just too confusing. There was just too much noise coming off of humans. And I focused on animals. And then when I spent time with animals and learned how to interact with safe beings, I was able to then turn toward the human culture and the human world and start looking at emotions. So instead of empathizing with people, which was too hard at that time, I empathized with emotions directly to try to understand what they were for. So I would watch anger, for instance, in the raging man across the street. And then I would watch anger in my father, who didn't really do anger, and then in my mother, who never did it. Right? So I had, lots of different options for looking at how people did anger. And then I began to understand what happens to the raging man and what happens to my dad and what happens to my mom in relation to how their anger works. So I was able then to begin to understand anger as the emotion that sets boundaries. And if you don't have enough, you won't be able to set boundaries, and people will sort of trample all over you. If you have too much, you'll set boundaries that are so harsh that you'll hurt other people. So there's like this middle place with boundaries where you and I, for instance, you might say something that's incorrect, and I could say, well, yes, I understand that. And also there's this other piece that I think we're missing, right? Instead of saying, well, Edwin, you're just wrong. Do you know what I mean? I can now work with my anger in a kind of a dance way to understand that what I need to do is set boundaries and not hurt you, right? And each of the emotions, fear turns out to be about intuition and instinct, and sadness turns out to be the emotion that comes forward when you're holding on to something that really isn't working for you. And sadness comes forward to say, I will help you let it go. And you can let it go. So if people have too much sadness, they might let go of things that they need. Or if they don't have enough sadness, they'll hold on to things that aren't very good for them. And their lives will start to become overwhelmed by how little sadness they're doing. Just as lives will become overwhelmed by how much sadness this other person is doing. So for me, using empathy on things that were safe and understandable, which when I was little did not include human beings.
Well, let me paraphrase here what I was hearing so far. Is that I was hearing as a child you didn't you had difficulty relating with people, and that you ended up or actually farther back, your empathy, your feeling is relating to the world. It's even not just for people, but for animals and things even. Yeah. So it's really this broad experience of relating with kind of all of life. And then as a child, you're having difficulty relating to people, so you related more, I guess, what did you say, to animals or so forth? But then when you started relating to people, you started looking not so much as the whole person, but a specific emotion, so like the emotion of fear, and then you started looking at different fears and really trying to understand what was the fear about, and then you're saying that behind the fear is trying to tell you something. There's something behind it, and you're looking at what's behind the fear, and it's the empathy itself that is allowing you to connect with those experiences. If I understand it right. Yeah, and then to be able to use empathy to understand all emotions, especially the ones that everybody hates, right? Or the ones that everyone says, well, we just won't have that emotion. I'm thinking, I don't know if you've ever studied Jungian psychology, but the things that people don't want would be the things that are in the shadow. And those things tend to come out and attack you precisely because you don't want them. So I would look at the emotions people hated and the emotions people wanted at all times, and the emotions that people never spoke of. And so I ended up, through my empathy, able to start to understand human culture and human behavior by understanding emotions, which are the motivation for behavior. So for me, I think it was lucky, because a lot of people who are hyper-empaths just simply turn off. They just forget it. I think I was lucky that I kind of went, there's a way in. There's a way
to figure this out. So that for me is kind of the first basis of empathy, is that empathy is an emotional skill. And to understand emotions makes you a safer and happier and healthier empath.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because a lot of empaths, you hear that, oh, it's too much, I'm taking in too much, and they want to create boundaries, and then it's even, I hear a lot like saying, I have to practice saying no, and it's like, say no to everything, right? And then you put up all these boundaries, it seems like you just get kind of, closed off inside that, versus that the empathy, if we can use empathy and use it for understanding, that it can actually be a doorway into, I guess, deeper connection and understanding.
Yeah, yeah. And there's also an empathic way to lean in and say no. And I think that's a trick, as you get older, right? This is not something children can really figure out. But as you get older, you can have empathy and set a boundary at the same time by leaning in and saying, I see that what you would like is for me, for instance, for me to go to this movie with you, which is too loud for me and it's not a movie that I am interested in. And at the same time, I see that you want to spend time with me. Do you know what I mean? So I'm saying, so how can we make both of these work? Do you want to go to the movie and then we'll meet for coffee afterward? Do you know what I mean? So I'm saying no, but I'm saying yes to the underlying thing, which is that the person wants to spend time.
Yeah, it's kind of like the improv of yes and.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
It's the whole improv where instead of just putting up this wall saying no, it's like, hey, I really hear what it is that you're wanting. You're listening to what the deeper message is, but what the person is saying, but you're also sharing yourself more deeply in a yes, but also saying, well, this is what's really going on for me. I don't really want to go to a loud movie. So you're kind of you're actually becoming more empathic with yourself, what I would call self-empathy, and kind of more authentic. And so it's actually a growth kind of experience versus just, I'm going to say no just so I can have, feel like I can say no. It seems to me like a dead end.
Yeah, and I love yes and. It's the perfect thing. With a yes and, the person who wanted to go to the movies meets you, Edwin, with your needs and your hopes and, wishes, and hears that you care about him or her, right? But with a no, what they know is you don't ever want to go to a movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or you're not available. And you're not saying that. So with yes and, it's like, let's see how we can renegotiate this so that you meet me as a person who is an individual who doesn't like loud movies but likes you. If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do, because I see this all the time. I mean, not all the time, but I see it come up a lot. And I hear people saying, oh, I'm just practicing. I had a friend actually who said that I'm practicing my no's, and it's very painful to me. Like, oh, you get to practice saying no. It feels very painful and alienating, and I can see how it gets people pissed off. Okay, you're going to say no. Well, I'm going to say no too. See how you like it, kind of thing. And I've had the same thing where I'm trying to get someone involved in something, and they really empathize with me exactly like you're saying, and they have a dialogue, and at the end, I feel great. They said no, but I feel like really like there was a sense of connection come out of it, and I feel like it's a really healthy way of coming to an understanding, and there was no resentments afterwards. Where this other person, I have a little bit of resentment around it. Because, oh, great, you get to practice your nose on me,
Here, I'm going to put a picture of Edwin up. You can say no to it, and I'm going to go to lunch. You can practice really nicely. Yeah, I think a lot of people get so overwhelmed by empathy that they think they need tactics. Do you know what I'm saying? Tactics and scripts and behaviors, and I'm just going to say no right now. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's so much discomfort about emotion and about being available to people that people think that they need to like sort of put on their empathy outfit, tie it closed, and instead of opening up and being available to the discomfort that exists in relationships and just having that be okay. Yeah.
And that's the topic, benefits of empathy. Empathy helps you uncover the information then behind every emotion, so you can find out the emotions that are coming up you can go into those and see what's within them, what's the message and the information within or behind, or however you want to say it.
Yeah, for instance, if someone throws a lot of anger, then I know, okay, this person needs to set boundaries. This person is feeling unsafe. So I'm going to step back first, right? Just step back and calm my body down. And let them know that I'm not going to trample over their boundaries, that I've seen it. And then I just check in with them. Sometimes when people throw a lot of anger, then probably it's best to just let them have their time. Just let them have their peace and their moment. But to understand emotions, or when someone is having a lot of fear, instead of saying, don't be a coward, there's nothing to be afraid of, which is exactly the wrong thing to say. Instead, to know that fear is instincts and intuition, to say, what are you sensing? What's going on? Right? To move to yes and into the emotion, right? Or if they're feeling sad, just to calm your body down and just allow the sadness to happen. Instead of going, oh, don't cry, come on, there's nothing to cry about. You're going to get over it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, instead of blocking the emotion or putting it down or demeaning it, it's like, I want to hear the emotion that you have and the message that you're trying to send within that.
And I'm not afraid of it. And I'm not going to fall apart because you are having an emotion. And I think that's another thing is understanding emotions well enough to know, oh, you are having sadness. I am not feeling that right now. But I'm okay with you feeling it. I think with a lot of people who are highly empathic, they just move directly into the sadness. And if they don't know how to work with sadness, then they get spun out in their own problems with sadness and lose empathy. Even though they're empathizing, they're sharing the emotion, they're losing empathy, which is a weird thing to say. But if they've gotten themselves overwhelmed because they don't have a practice for sadness, then that empathic process is kind of skewed. Right?
Yeah, it's that you're empathizing, you're picking up the emotion is too overwhelming, and then you go into your own kind of discomfort and your own your own story, and you're actually detaching. At that point, you're no longer empathic with the other person. You've become into your own experience, and you're detaching. And then in that case, in that situation, you're the one that's needing empathy, someone to listen to you, because that's, I think, the academics call it personal distress, right? And some people call it empathic distress, but I think personal distress is better, and at that point, you're actually in need of empathy, and people confuse, because you need to be heard, because I'm stressed. You need someone there to kind of hear you about your distress, kind of a little emergency empathy. So that's a really important point there, because that really gets confused there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us know that if we're feeling really angry, we don't want to express it because we know we're going to knock other people, into their own thing. Or if we need to cry, we will not do it, because we know that people don't feel comfortable around crying. So we'll know, just like pull it up into your eye sockets and go someplace else, because people will, oh no, what's wrong? Do you know what I mean?
The sympathy comes out, and let me
get overwhelmed.
For you.
Yeah, and let me fix you. And I was like, I'm just crying. I'm not broken. This isn't leaking, So yeah, I think there's so much trouble around emotion and understanding it that I'm really happy that I somehow fell into the idea of using my empathy on emotions so that I could understand them, and so that being as wildly over empathic as I am isn't a big deal anymore. It's just not a big deal. Woohoo!
Oh, great. Well, I think I'm really with you there. I think in terms of the way of using the empathy and how you say no, and kind of about personal distress. So those are, I think, really great insights. So what I was thinking, we'd move on to the next one, which is